When you think of Slaughterhouse-Five, there's probably a lot that comes to mind. Dresden in the war, time travel.
The imminent takeover of humanity by the almighty Tralfamadorian race.
But y'all are missing the main point. The main boy. Let me educate you, because today we're talking about your dank boy Kilgore Trout. You know, the old curmudgeon who wrote books that no one read but Billy Pilgrim? This is his story. Theodore Sturgeon was Kurt Vonnegut's original inspiration for Kilgore Trout. He was a sci-fi author, born on February 26, 1918. Remember this date. He also happened to write some screenplays for Star Trek. Theodore's last name is Sturgeon, which is a fish breed, hence Kilgore's last name, Trout, which is another fish breed. As you may recall, Kurt Vonnegut made mentions to Kilgore Trout's works in his books. One of Trout's works was Venus on the Half-Shell. With Vonnegut's permission, writer Philip Jose Farmer wrote the book under the name Kilgore Trout, which is why, along with being Theodore Sturgeon, Kilgore Trout is also Farmer. Not convinced? Well, remember that date I told you to remember? February 26, 1918 to be exact. Well, what if I told you that Philip Jose Farmer was born January 26, 1918, exactly 1 month before Sturgeon? It's not a coincidence. I also want to throw the fact that I believe Kurt Vonnegut to be Kilgore Trout as well. Why else would the initials KT be used? Now let's take a look at the actual name Kilgore Trout. The first name can easily be broken down into Kilgore, but the last name doesn't make sense with that, at least not in English. If we translate Trout into German, since Dresden is in Germany, it becomes 4L. And for the francophones out there, you know L in French means her. Putting the words together, we get Kilgore for her. But who's Gore and who's female? The first part is simple. Gore refers to Al Gore, Vice President of Bill Clinton. Now, why do we need to kill Al Gore? Because he was born in 1948, the year 1984 by George Orwell released. You see, Kilgore Trout also happens to be Emmanuel Goldstein, ex-party member and assumed leader of the Brotherhood. Now, Goldstein also had a real-life inspiration in the form of Leon Trotsky, Russian Soviet politician. Just looking at his name proves our point. Furthermore, if I asked you to guess what year he goes into office, I think you'd be able to get it. That's right, 1918, the same year that Sturgeon and Farmer were born. In 1984, Goldstein's whereabouts are unknown, as the passage reads, somewhere or another he was still alive and hatching his conspiracies, perhaps somewhere beyond the sea under the protection of his foreign paymasters, perhaps even, so is occasionally rumored, in some hiding place in Oceania itself. But knowing Kilgore Trout, we can easily narrow down our options. I'm not a massy fish, but with some research we can find that both trout and sturgeon are found on the coasts of North America and Eurasia. Eurasia? Yes, Eurasia. And if we use a map to observe the coast of Eurasia, there is one place of interest. Norway. I know you think there's Norway for me to relate this, but wait. There's still Shakespeare. 'Tis correct, we have arrived to Macbeth. If we take a look at the beginning of the play, it is clearly indicated that Scotland is at war with Norway. With some research, we find that the king of Norway is a man called Sweno, or should I say Kilgore Trout. Historically speaking, the Norwegian army was killed by Macbeth's army, yet Sweno mysteriously escaped. The last mention of Sweno in Macbeth occurs in the lines that now Sweno, the Norway's king, craves composition, nor would we deny him burial of his men till he dispersed at St. Combs Inch, $10,000 to our general use. Now, we gotta look at the big picture, not St. Combs Inch, but Scotland as a whole. Isn't it mind-boggling? Do you not see it? Let me draw it out for you. Yes, 'tis a lightning bolt. And if we, happen to rotate it and maybe add a Q to it, bam! Theodore Sturgeon's signature. Shakespeare and history working together to prove Sweno is indeed Kilgore Trout. You may have forgotten, but we still haven't looked at the second part of the statement. For her. To solve this, we need to look at a second possible escape route for Goldstein. The obvious decision would be to go where no one could get him, the undisputed area, and there's an obvious place here, Darwin, Australia. But what does Darwin have to do with Trout? A passage in Trout's book, The Big Board, reads, the flying saucer creatures who captured Trout's hero ask him about Darwin. My man Charles Darwin not only theorized evolution, but also happens to be Kilgore Trout. Just look at the similarities to Kurt Vonnegut's life. With a theory like evolution, you're bound to clash with religion, as is the case with Charles Darwin and his wife. In fact, Vonnegut and his wife also separated because she became Christian, while Vonnegut was an atheist. Who was his wife? Well, that's the her we were looking for. Jane Mary Cox was Vonnegut's best friend since childhood and his high school sweetheart. Sound like a familiar story? Dang right it does. Good old Jane Gallagher, and more importantly, Holden Caulfield, or, you guessed it, Kilgore Trout. Holden perfectly fits into the good writer characteristic of all the other Trouts who have published a famous piece. Not to mention that Holden is from New York, the place where Vonnegut spent the later half of his life. The timeline may not add up, but that is easily explained with the fact that Kilgore Trout was unstuck in time. Why else was he so suspicious about Billy Pilgrim and Slaughterhouse-Five? Furthermore, all the other books portrayed the similar theme of time and repetition, which I will discuss more in detail later. So we proved that Kilgore Trout is indeed multiple people from different time periods, which he's able to accomplish by being unstuck in time. But what does that mean? This must mean that he has met the Chalfamidorians, meaning just like Billy Pilgrim, he knows a lot about them, and we can conclude that his books about them are correct. But what is my point with all of this? Kilgore Trout was trying to send us a message. In his book, Protocols of the Elders of Chalfamidor, he talks about a time with the Chalfamidorians and says, "It so happened, according to this story, that the legend of Adam and Eve was being written down for the first time. A woman was doing it. Until then, the charming buncombe had been passed from generation to generation by word of mouth. The elders let her write down most of the origin myth just the way she heard it, the way everybody told it, until she got close to the end. Then they took control of her brain and had her write down something which had never been part of the myth before. It was a speech by God to Adam and Eve, supposedly. This was it, and life would become pure hell for microorganisms soon afterwards. Fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Cough. So the people of the earth thought they had the instructions from the creator of the universe himself to wreck the joint. Turns out we've been wrong about our existence this whole time. What is the point then if humanity was just a prank by the Chalfamidorians? That's where existentialism comes in. Our purpose of life can be defined by ourselves as individuals. That's the whole point of Slaughterhouse-Five. Whatever happens is meant to happen, will happen, and life will still go on when it happens. Or better stated in the words of Kurt Vonnegut, so it goes.